Hey creatives, today I'm sharing a really great technique. It's very easy and it's a simple mask that you can use with your embossing powders. Now I'm doing this in an art journal, so this is my junk journal, but this technique will work just as well in your painting, your mixed media, or even your card making projects. So have a watch and think about how you're going to use it. So the page I'm working on already has some acrylic paint on it, and it has a couple of layers of the PaperArtsy Fresco finish paints. But as always, I've got links to everything I've used in the description below. Now I put these paints on using an old plastic card, so a gift card, something like that. And if you look closely, there's a little bit of scraping back of that Baltic blue colour over the buff, so you can see some of that texture. But now I'm ready to put on the next layer, and this layer is going to be my mask layer. So I've just grabbed a piece of printer paper, and that's what I'm going to make my mask with. And the shape I'm going to use today is a heart. So here's a very quick and easy way of making a heart. I've trimmed a piece of paper down to approximately the size I want to have for my focal image. And I'm just going to use this as a guide. It won't be exactly this size. Then fold it in half and cut half a heart. So this is a great technique if you want your hearts to be equal on both sides. And remember, you can always draw it on first if you're not so sure about just going with a pair of scissors and cutting it out straight away. I've grabbed two colours from my desk which will contrast beautifully with that blue background. And as many of you know, I've had these Amsterdam paints on my desk quite a lot these past few weeks. Now I'm using a little bit of punchinello just to add a little bit of texture. This isn't really necessary, I just thought it would be fun. And if you wanted to, you could, instead of using punchinello, use a stencil. I've carried on using my plastic card to apply my paint. It's just a really nice way of getting the paint on quickly and also adding lots of texture as well. For me, I'm not so worried about it being perfect, but if this is something that bothers you, then you can always use other techniques such as using a stencil brush or using a sponge to apply your paint. It all just really depends on what kind of project you're doing and of course what kind of look you're trying to achieve. Once I got the rough shape and a little bit of texture on there, I just took the mask off and carried on around the edges, just defining them a little bit more and adding a little bit more paint to increase the thickness in some areas. And then once I was happy with that, I just let that to one side to dry. Because now I want to use my heart mask to make a heart stencil. And this stencil is what I'm going to use for my embossing layer, as you'll see. So when I come to cut out my heart from my stencil, I'm actually going to make it very slightly smaller than the heart aperture on my journal page. And this is just because I don't want my embossing to be right up against that paint line. It's just an aesthetic thing. You can do whatever you want really. There's no right or wrong way of doing it. It's just the way I wanted to do it. So the stamp I'm going to use for my embossing is a background stamp, and it's this Halftone Spots. And background stamps and texture stamps are perfect for this technique, and also some of your pattern stamps as well. I really like these background collections from Creative Stamps. They're really useful, and for someone like me who likes texture, they're perfect for that. I have already dusted the whole page with some anti-static powder, just to be on the safe side, and of course the paint is completely dry as well. So once I've lined up exactly where I want the stencil to be, I'm going to ink up my stamp with Versamark, or you can use any embossing ink, will work just as well. And then I'm going to stamp it through the stencil. And this is where a paper stencil is really handy, because it's a lot thinner and a lot easier to stamp through. And of course if you need to, you can always tape your stencil down with some low tack tape like washi tape. And if you think you're going to have trouble stamping on the surface that you've got down there, then use a positioning tool like a MISTI or something like that. And I've got a couple of videos where I've used a MISTI in my art journaling, so I'll link those below for you and also in the cards in case you wanted to see how I did it. This one I don't really need to because I think I'll be okay. The surface is quite smooth, even though there is a little bit of texture on there, but there's not lots of texture on there. I'm using two different colours of embossing powders just to give it a little bit more interest. And I'm going to heat set it in exactly the normal way that I would heat set any embossing powder, but I'm just being a little bit extra careful because I don't want to bubble any of the paint layers. So try not to overheat it and try not to have the heat tool too close to the page. Now I want my heart design to just really pop, so I'm going to do a couple of techniques to just make it stand out even more, and they're going to utilise that stamping and embossing powder pattern that I've got on there. So for the first one, I'm just going to replace my stencil and add a little bit more paint, and I'm going to go back to that very first paint that was on this page already. And doing this has picked up some of that lovely embossing texture, but I think the paint's just a little bit too thick, so I'm going to add some water just to thin it out a little bit. And then pick up the excess with a bit of kitchen towel and clean off any paint from the places I don't want it. And then I'll just let that dry completely, because the next thing I want to do is to add a little bit of line work. But I want the surface to be really dry before I start using a pen. For my line work, I'm just going to add some details that will really bring out the heart and that circle design that's on that page. So it's there in the stamping and embossing, and it's also there with that punchinello that I used on that pink and orange paint layer. It's definitely a repeated theme, so I'm just going to bring it out and make it more prominent. And using a pen is just a really quick and easy way to do that. So whilst I'm adding in my line details, let me know if you're enjoying this video and finding it useful, so leave me a comment below, I would love to hear. And of course, any likes of the video are hugely appreciated, and please do feel free to share them with anyone else you think might like it too. And if you aren't already one of my subscribers, then please do subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss my next video, which will be Sunday, because I post art videos on Sundays and Wednesdays. So even though this technique is really simple, it's a very effective one, isn't it? And it's a great way of extending your stamps as well and making something that's unique to you. So let me know what projects you would like to see this technique used on next. Do you think you'll use it for your card making or your art journaling, maybe your mixed media project or a painting project? I would love to hear, so do leave me a comment letting me know how you're going to use it. I think the heart is really starting to pop now, but I'm going to add some bling. And this is one of my favourite painty blings. It's the Brilliant Gold Gouache paint from Holbein, and it really does have a lovely gold shine to it, which is quite hard to get in a lot of paints. I mean, pretty much like yourself, I've tried out different metallic paints, and so far this is by far my favourite. It is an artist paint, so it is a little bit more expensive, but if you can afford it, it's well worth it. And this paint has a texture to it. It's not completely smooth, it has a bit of a grain to it. Now I'm going to dry brush it on in various places over my page, and I'm just going to pick up some texture from that embossing powder, and then add it into the circles just to make them bling a little bit more. And I don't really need a lot of the paint, I'm just adding a little bit, and I really love the texture and the way it's picking up the texture in that embossed heart. I think that looks pretty neat. Now I don't know about you, but I still think this page needs something. Even with all that lovely bling and all that lovely texture, it still seems to be missing something. So I'm going to put some scribbled text on here with a pen, but you could easily stamp over this instead. If you had a texture stamp of some description or a text stamp, that would look really great too. And you can use your mask from earlier to just mask off that heart area and stamp over the top. So let's take a quick look at how that turned out, and look at all that great texture. Yeah, I think I'm going to be using these stamps quite a lot. I think they've become my new favourite background stamps. There's a wood grain one too, which is great. Don't know about you, but I love wood grain. I hope you enjoyed watching that technique and watching this page come together. I'm going to be back on Wednesday with a new art video, so do join me again. In the meantime, feel free to binge on all of my back catalogue of videos, and here's some suggestions. Have a wonderful creative few days until I see you again soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.